station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston, this is the International Space Station. Ready for the event.
Senator Nelson, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call the station for a voice check.
This is Bill Nelson. I'm in the Senate. Do you hear me?
Senator Nelson, read you loud and clear. Help me.
Dr. Marshburn, you are one who joined NASA in 1994 as a flight surgeon, and 10 years later, you were selected to become a member of the astronaut office. Your first space flight came in '09 aboard Endeavour, and now you're on your second trip to space. You spent the last 4.5 months orbiting the Earth on the station. What is your specific location right now, Tom?
Well, Senator, right now I'm at the forward end of the space station. I'm in the Japanese experiment module. So our velocity vector is that way. We're flying that way. All around me and behind me is the vacuum of space. Behind me is actually an external platform that's encrusted with experiments looking at the Earth and looking at space. So this is a module like all the other laboratories here behind all the walls, just filled with the experiments and racks that we work on. So that's my location now, and you're right, this is the coming to the end of a 4-month mission, feeling adapted, feeling great. It's been wonderful being able to be efficient and get a lot done up here. It's very exciting.
Well, in the early part of the space shuttle program, we never had any time to get to the window because every minute was playing with our experiments, or else we were supposed to be sleeping. Many times of which we didn't. That's when we had time to get to the window. Do you have a lot of time to look back at this incredible planet?
Well, actually, during the day, not a lot of time. Now, one of our experiments, one of our payloads, we call them, that we are participating in, is crew Earth observations, looking at flooding sites. We were just flying over Saudi Arabia earlier today, looking at some of the flooding that's been occurring there, getting photographs to the ground right away for disaster response or for a better understanding of what's going on in that part of the world. So immediate contact with the Earth. That's when we can see the Earth, have time to see the Earth during the day. But you're right, it's at nighttime, usually past the sleep time, that we get a chance to float up to the window or with our colleagues and spend some time looking out the window. And they're, as you know, it's very unforgettable times.
Well, in the cupola, I understand it's almost like 3-dimension. What's it like to look back at the Earth from there?
Well, I wish every head of state around the world could come and see our Earth from the cupola. It is a 360-degree view, and directly overhead. Overhead is the Earth, so we're actually, from an Earth standpoint, have our heads down. But I've found that I've fallen in love with the Earth again. Everything that it has to offer, all of the incredible beauty, nuance, the colors, the variance from country to country and from season to season, is remarkable, and it's almost impossible to pull your eyes away from it. But it's what strikes every astronaut is that there are no borders down there, and that with our lives with our international partners up here knocks down a lot of the barriers that we have for getting through technological difficulties and language difficulties and cultural differences. And we actually share that looking out the window together. So the Earth is riveting, it's beautiful. Our existence on there appears to be very fragile. The atmosphere is very thin. So we try to get pictures to convey that to everyone on the ground. It really changes the way you see the Earth and its resources. It's quite remarkable.
Tom, you look pretty good. You look like you're physically fit. We've been concerned that there's bone loss in 0G for extended periods of time. Tell us about the things that you're trying to do to keep yourself in shape, which you obviously have. And how do you adjust to the fact that the fluids shift into the upper torso outside of the influence of gravity?
Well, you're exactly right. That's one of the biggest challenges. Another way of putting that, actually, the zero gravity and the atrophy that occurs in the muscles and the bones and our heart and blood vessels as well, that on top of the radiation we're getting from the outside. High radiation doses up here, we're all radiation workers. All of that accelerates, it's an analog for an acceleration of the aging process. So it actually offers an opportunity to do a lot of research. You can do in a few years what you can only do on the ground in decades through the final years of someone's life. So what we've been doing is research on that area. I believe that we're getting close to solving the problem for the bone and muscle atrophy that you've alluded to. I exercise 2.5 hours a day, a little bit of cardiovascular, a lot of resistance exercise. I'm participating right now. I'm a subject in an experiment where we're looking at dietary changes. It's called ProK. And seeing if we can tweak the diet with the right protein to potassium ratio to actually reduce bone loss. Our food group has also worked very hard on changing our food, reducing the salt in the food, and has actually been invited to a lot of conferences around the country because the food is great, it's wonderful, it's great tasting, and it's relatively low in salt. So again, we don't leach the bone out of our bodies. So these are all avenues that we're working on to maintain bone and muscle, to maintain our heart and our blood vessel status. Feel great. I think I'm going to certainly be ready to stand up and walk around when I get back to the earth, but we'll see in about a week.
So you've been there 4.5 months. Do you think when you first stand up back on Earth, you'll be able to stand?
I think so. I was able to after my shuttle flight. I didn't exercise as much on the shuttle flight as I have here. I've been very diligent about it. There will be people around if there's any problems. There's a lot of variance amongst astronauts about how they adapt when they arrive and when they come back. So we don't know everything about it, but I certainly hope so. I intend on trying to stand up. I'm going to take some fluids into my body, either through an IV or drinking some water, because you may know that we lose body fluids up here as well. Our body interprets zero gravity by saying, hey, there's too much fluid on board, and it gets rid of it. It adapts very well to space. And it takes some time to adapt again to the ground when you get back. So all of that together, I think we're prepared. There's a lot of interesting research in that area as well, but I think we're prepared, and we'll see what happens.
Well, when you get back, I want you to tell me if you were able to stand immediately. I tried, and I fell right over. I want to introduce Senator Ted Cruz, my co-leader of the Science and Space Subcommittee of the Commerce Committee. Senator Cruz is from Texas. His hometown, as a matter of fact, is Houston, but he's on the opposite side. Clear Lake, you're on the southeast side. He's over a little bit to the west. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. I want to thank you, Dr. Marshburn, for your service, and I'd love to just ask a question. What surprised you the most about your time on the space station? Is there something you didn't expect that now 4.5 months into it has surprised you?
Yes, what surprised me was that how busy and vibrant life and the work here on the space station is. The space station is a hard place to go to sleep because if it's not looking out the window, it is every moment enjoying the effects of zero gravity, and especially the work during the day. We are busy as can be in a wonderful way. You may know, we've just added up to 4 comm loops. We can talk to scientists all around the world, and for a few days we've had every loop socked in with conversation with scientists as we do experiments. There's so much going on up here. It's just hard to stop, quite frankly. It's hard to stop, go to sleep, and leave it alone for a while. So that's, very honestly, that is what has shocked me the most.
Is there particular research that you're working on now that you're able to discuss that you think is exciting or particularly promising? I
don't know where to start. Being a doctor, I'll be preferential to those experiments. Just yesterday, I was finalizing I was the first subject, along with my colleagues, first subjects in the spinal ultrasound study, using ultrasound as we all know it on the ground, but in a very novel way, looking at our spines, doing something that's good for human spaceflight, that is figuring out what is the cause of back pain, which is something that occurs in some astronauts, particularly maybe even back injury when we get back to the Earth and we put our spine under compression again. In comparing these ultrasound images to MRI. Now, we have ultrasound on the ground, obviously. They don't usually use it for the back. But what's very exciting about this is that we are finding ways to use ultrasound, even being able to visualize the spinal cord in ways that were completely unexpected. There are countries and obviously places, even in the United States, where there are no MRIs, are no CAT scanners, even in emergency rooms where the wait is 8 to 10 hours in the middle of a city. This is one example, a small example, but one example of how NASA is using a current technology, applying it to a very difficult problem, that is bringing medical care to astronauts where we don't have a hospital up here. And that has developed techniques and processes that can be used on the Earth. That's been done many times. As a matter of fact, I'll just have to say, training for every surgical resident in the United States right now uses a technique that was developed by people that were solving a problem for NASA on board the space station that is very essential for trauma care in the first hour. It's saving lives right now. This is a part of training for every surgical resident and surgeon in the U.S. right now. It's been adopted. It came completely from the desire to provide medical care for astronauts. That was an ultrasound technique as well. So I'm very excited about it as a doctor, but I think it's a great example of what happens when you ask very smart people to do a very hard thing and tell them also you're helping the exploration of the universe. It's a great combination and wonderful things come out of that.
Terrific. Thank you.
Tell us about, are you still doing crystal growth in 0G? And if not, what are some of the promising medical research experiments, for example, in the development of drugs utilizing the unique properties of 0G?
There is crystallography and crystal research going on right now, particularly in this module, in the Japanese experiment module. That is one experiment. We are astronauts are subjects as well as surrogate scientists, but we're also lab technicians. We get things going and let them run. And the crystal growth experiments, there's several of them actually, and we stock them. We get them going, and then we resupply them to the ground. So that's going on all the time. In my opinion, one of the greatest achievements recently on the space station is the ability to turn that into an assembly line, a process whereby we can bring up lots of samples of crystals, lots of samples of proteins, and then put them up in these laboratories, return them to the Earth, and then companies and scientists, universities can go back and look at them and really define proteins to a level they've never been able to before. You're probably familiar with better description of the genes that cause Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. There's in any number of drugs that have been coming through. It's fairly rare that a useful application is discovered, but now with the accelerated numbers that we're able to process up here on the space station, I feel that the findings and the discoveries are going to be accelerating, coming out much more quickly. Other things outside crystallography, you're probably familiar with the salmonella vaccine, which came out of being able to bring up, it's something no one ever expected, but bring up bacteria, microorganisms up here, and they actually change, probably due to microgravity, and become more virulent, and therefore they're much better test cases for producing vaccines. We can get to the answer of the proper vaccine much faster because of these super microorganisms that occur up here, that grow up here. Along the medical field, another thing, so much of this is unexpected. There's a capillary flow experiment I was just working on the other day. The intent is to provide fuel tanks for spacecraft that don't have to have pumps, just use capillary flow. Well, it turns out microflow, the flow of microliters of fluid, can use this technology as well, and they've been working on producing better lab-on-a-chip technology, so you can have a greater suite of laboratory analysis you can do on blood just on a chip. So put a CD in a little disc and get a blood analysis accomplished. The list goes on. I hope I'm not talking too much, but it's very hard to say in just a few minutes everything that's going on, particularly in the medical field.
Tom, what is it about zero-G that is causing the differences in the production of a vaccine for MRSA, and I also for salmonella, and I also understand for MRSA?
Yes, sir, for MRSA as well. That's a great question, and I'm sure that there are scientists that can answer it much better than I could. If just on my somewhat layman's knowledge on it, every cell has a cytoskeleton. There are changes to that cytoskeleton because of zero gravity. How that changes gene expression within the cell, within the microorganism, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe it's not microgravity. Maybe it's potentially the radiation environment. Although they're somewhat protected here, I think it is microgravity. But it's a great example of we are in our infancy here and seeing what the benefits of doing research in microgravity are. And so I can't answer your question, but I would love to know the answer. I would love to talk to the experts that maybe are coming close to an answer to that question.
Let me ask a lighter question on a more personal side, which is, what do you do for recreation up there? Are there games? Do you play Nerf golf in zero-G, or what do you do for fun?
You know, actually, for me, just moving around the space station is a lot of fun. We can have some competitions as to who can get through a module without touching a wall, or who can stay free-floating for the longest time without touching a wall. But just the day-to-day work, I love the efficiencies that we build up after we've been here for a while. Learn how to not put anything anywhere, but just kind of, it's like static juggling. You just put everything up there and it just sits there once you get good enough at it. And you can do a lot of work without having to put anything down or restrain it. Looking out the window is a great pastime. We have a guitar up here. We play guitar, usually just by ourselves, often to a module somewhere. We do have some books as well, but it's hard to tear yourself away from that window, that's for sure.
The people on Earth don't really know a lot about what's going on. We have a contraption up there that's as long as from one goalpost to the other goalpost on a football field. And all of this scientific experiment is going on with 6 human beings. What could you tell us Earthlings that we can do better to get them to understand this extraordinary flying machine that you're in right now?
That's a great question. I believe we're making inroads as we go. One of my colleagues, Chris Hadfield, has been using music to tell the story of not just the personal experience of living on space station, but just a glimpse of what it means in terms of the science return as well. Social media, we've been trying to use quite a bit. It surprised me somewhat to find out that it's really touched a nerve within the public, that they really do want to know what's going on up here. They are fascinated with it. They like the direct access that some of the social media provides, so they can ask directly a question and get a response directly back from an astronaut. So we've been exploring that a good bit. That with the events that we're having right now, we obviously are talking to a lot of schools, do a lot of pre-flight and post-flight work as well. But it's a great question. I think we're getting better at it, and we'll continue to look for better ways.
Well, you are clearly a part of that, and we thank you. We're going to Mars, and we may go back to that retrograde orbit where we're going to nudge a piece of space into an orbit there, a stable orbit. We may go back to the moon in preparation to go to Mars. What do you think on the station that you're doing in preparation for us to go to Mars?
Well, virtually everything to keep humans alive and productive up here on the space station, that is no small matter. It's something that we get better at every day. You know, we live inside of a power station. That's the biggest one in orbit. That's why we're able to run so many experiments. We have a water system where we reclaim almost 100% of our water. These are all things that we have to be able to do to leave Earth orbit and not be able to resupply. So I believe I'm living and working in the first Mars vehicle. The next generation is going to learn from everything that we have learned, the engineers, astronauts, the people that build spacecraft. Everything that we've learned here is going to be used and needs to be used for the next generation of vehicle. So I think we're doing it right now, and it's not easy. We have to keep doing it. It's not a switch you can turn off and turn back on again and think you have the answer right away. It's a process that's very difficult and needs to be continued.
We have 4 minutes left in the window. Let's give somebody in the audience a chance. Step up and identify yourself for Tom.
Hi, I'm Jason Hopkins. I work in Senator Bill Nelson's office. So can you explain how, U.S. private space companies are using the ISS as a technology platform?
Well, primarily, first of all, it's a destination. This is a product they can provide and a place to go in space. We need it. We need the supply. We need to be able to return results to the ground. So if they can do it, that is an incredibly impressive technology demonstration. Going into space is not easy. We can still just barely do it. We've had companies with some problems with launches. That's completely expected because this is still a very hard thing to do. Now, having said that, they're coming up with great efficiencies, great new technologies built on what NASA's already done so that they can get probably cheaper, better, faster, get things up to the space station. So besides everything we've learned about spacecraft, we're also providing the destination for them to get to as well.
Thank you, Doctor, for your important work. My name is Ben Bradley, and I just wanted to ask something about your daily routine, what you go through, and how that helps you throughout the day developing a routine. I know you've been up there for 4 months, so you must have something down.
Well, the ground certainly helps with that a lot. Every 5 minutes is blocked out. But there is some variability there. We wake up, and typically we'll read summaries from the ground. We do our homework. The ground sends us up the plan for the day and why the rationale for the plan, things to look out for. We read about the experiments. We might even start looking into the procedures to see if there's any hiccups that might come up. But then we just implement the plan that we've been given. If we find efficiencies, we try to fill in more work during that time. Obviously we have a little break for a meal in the middle of the day. We do have our 2.5-hour block of exercise. That can occur just about any time during the day. So that's very much into our routine as well. And then after a meal, which we often share with our Russian colleagues, it's great to be able to get together and just talk about the day, talk about the work just amongst colleagues. We also have a planning conference, both at the beginning and the end of the workday. It's kind of bookended that way. And then it's time off. We do kind of what I described before. I'm partial to doing a little bit of homework at night to get ready for the following day as well. And usually at the end of the day, we call home. We have an opportunity to either email or call our families at home.
All right, they're telling us we've got to wrap, so we want to thank you. We want to wish you and 2 of your crewmates a safe journey home. And as we close out, why don't you do a backflip for us? Show us how a great gymnast you are.
Well, I don't know about that, but let me give it a try.
All right, thank you so much.
It has been a real privilege to talk to you. Thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you very much.
See you, Tom. See you back home.
The station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
Senator Nelson, members of the Senate and staff station, we are now resuming operational audio communication. Tom, we're ready for your CCE. Just let us know which SSC you'd like.